thank our witnesses for being here. Our Gulf partners have proven invaluable in opposing Iran's destabilizing agenda, fighting terrorism and recognizing Israel's right to exist. And I believe we must continue holding our allies to a high ethical and humanitarian standard. I appreciate the opportunity to learn more about U.S. efforts to prevent civilian casualties and foster respect for human rights in the Arabian Peninsula. When Canada's foreign minister criticized egregious human rights abuses, the Saudi government expelled the Canadian ambassador, withdrew its own ambassador to Canada, and froze pending trade and investment deals. The Saudis have engaged in similar disputes with Germany and I believe Sweden also. Mr. Singh, are Canada, Germany, and Sweden coordinating a response to the latest diplomatic feud, and how can we support our Canadian partners?
Thank you, Congresswoman. I don't know that they are coordinating a response. If so, it's not something I've heard about. But I do think that the episode you cite is an example of the kind of, frankly, reckless actions by the Saudis that are concerning to us, that are troubling to us, because it was a valid criticism, and the Saudi response was, in my view, totally out of proportion to what the Canadians had done. I would have liked to see us back up our Canadian allies in their criticism of the Saudis, because I don't think, this goes to what Mr. Sullivan was saying, I don't think it's good for us, or frankly good for the Saudis, that they feel as though they can kind of intimidate other countries into not criticizing them. From my point of view, this is not just a matter of values or morals, or those things are important. When human rights abuses are allowed to go forward unchecked, I think it also endangers the stability of these countries and encourages extremism.
Thank you. Increasing access to affordable food, fuel, and medicine is key to restoring stability in Yemen. But Houthi rebels have disrupted the movement of imports by targeting commercial and military vessels transiting the Red Sea. And Saudi Arabia has imposed periodic blockades. Dr. Carlin, how can the international community support freedom of navigation in the Red Sea and facilitate the movement of necessities to Yemeni ports?
Thank you for that question. I think the U.S. Military can be helpful, as can regional militaries, in facilitating freedom of navigation through these areas, whether it's assisting in transporting, whether it's helping regional navies through exercising by showing them how they might responsibly operate in that area, all of which can be useful.
Mr. Singh, preventing civilian casualties in the Yemen conflict is a primary goal of the U.S.-Saudi military cooperation. Can you describe how the United States is working with the coalition to end the killing of civilians? How effective have these efforts been?
Well, Congresswoman, obviously this is, I think, a top concern for our military officials and also our diplomatic officials who are dealing with this issue. As has been discussed here a little bit, we've done a number of things. One is by providing precision munitions to our allies. We have, especially in the wake of particular incidents, worked on the training of pilots. We've tried to help the Saudis in terms of investigating incidents to determine exactly what occurred. And we've also worked with them on questions of intelligence and these sort of do not target lists and so forth. As far as I understand it, and obviously you'd want a full briefing from our military officials, that's what we have done. I think that my impression is that I haven't heard any U.S. officials, let's put it that way, say that they feel as though the Saudis are deliberately targeting civilians. If we felt that way, I think we would have to end our cooperation with them. But I think we need to appreciate that the level of care and precision that the U.S. military brings to these conflicts is simply, frankly, unmatched almost anywhere else in the world. And that's why these kinds of long-term efforts at bringing up the abilities and capabilities of our allies is so important.
Mr. Sullivan, UN agencies and international NGOs are struggling to access areas in desperate need of humanitarian assistance. How can we work with our allies to do more to increase access for the UN and international NGOs. And any points of leverage that can be used to achieve this with the Saudis and the Emirates?
I defer to the expertise of Mr. Hardin, who I think has made a couple of really important points today. One is that a lot of this rests with the Houthis, over whom we don't have influence, but who we should be sure to be shining a spotlight on the extent to which they are blocking access through Hudaydah. But with the Saudis and Emiratis, I do think that we have influence and leverage both to open corridors across the Saudi border, as Mr. Hardin said earlier, and in respect to the Stockholm Agreement, which is fragile and sort of quasi-holding, working to restrain the Saudis and Emiratis so that more channels coming out of Hudaydah can be opened beyond basically the one road that's coming out right now. So those are available to us, but it's an imperfect set of tools because so much of this rests on making sure the Houthis step up to do their part.
Thank you very much, Mr.